Hello, I'm Dante Thompson, and welcome to Nite Line. I'll be your host this evening, and all my guests tonight are going to be on this monitor. That's right, we've got 2 Skype interviews that you don't want to miss. The first hour will be with Kevin Dunn, and he's directed a documentary about euthanasia that you really need to watch. It opens your eyes to a lot of things that I didn't know was going on in the world, and you might not know that it's going on in the world. And then my second hour guest is Robia Scott, and she used to be an actress in Hollywood, had starred in a lot of major roles, and then got saved, stopped acting, and now she's a speaker and also an author. We're going to be talking about her book. Also, we have our prayer partners standing by to take your call, so go to the phones tonight, 244-1616, and we also have the piano man, Wesley Davenport. A lot of people has been requesting him to come on here, and so he is back tonight to do some wonderful music. So right now, let's go to Wesley Davenport. He's going to be singing Right on Time. Alrighty, folks, that was the piano man, Wesley Davenport. He's going to be here the entire night. Wonderful music, wonderful guy. You don't want to miss a second of it. But tonight, joining me via Skype, and both my guests tonight are going to be joining me via Skype, is Mr. Kevin Dunn. And Kevin, you're not even in the country right now. I mean, you're Canadian, so you're up in Toronto. How's it going up there?
Well, don't hold that against me. Yes, I'm just outside of Toronto, and it's a pleasure to be on your show, Dante.
Now, you were telling me though you get to the South as much as you can, so.
I do a lot of traveling with my documentary work. Just in Nashville last week, in Alabama, and had a wonderful time. I always do. Southern hospitality is the greatest.
Well, I think so. I think our viewers are the wonderful, wonderful people that promote Southern hospitality. So, but you're here tonight to talk about your book, or not the book, the movie, our documentary, entitled "The Euthanasia Deception."
That's correct.
It's something that has been, euthanasia is something that has been popularized here lately in this country with the girl that, in Oregon. I can't think of her name right now. Yeah. And since then it's been a question of, everything, morality, religious conflict, and on both sides of the fence. How did you get involved in wanting to do a documentary on euthanasia?
Well, I've always been pro-life. See behind me, I have 6 kids.
Awesome.
So that side of the spectrum, the idea that life is sacred from conception was always and even more present now because we have the science to go with it.
Right.
So there's no question on that end of the spectrum. I always say, from conception until natural death. Well, what's natural death? Well, that means that I die naturally. But what does that mean? And so I started to, question my own, what this is all about, especially in light of what was happening in Belgium and the Netherlands, which years ago we thought, well, those crazy people over there, killing people, and the idea of adding killing in the medical system was just seems so strange to me. And then the Canadian Supreme Court knocks down the centuries-old law banning euthanasia because of one person's challenge saying, I should have the right to die. Now, regardless of that situation, because we all here, U.S., Canada, wherever we are, this is being debated in every place in the world, wherever you stand on it, and whatever the situation is with regards to these people that are challenging the system. I mean, God bless them. They're in really dire situations. There's no way we shouldn't be compassionate and be praying for these people. But the bottom line we have to remember in all this is what is the end result? I was on with a national broadcaster in Canada a couple of weeks ago, and they were trying to say, let's differentiate between euthanasia and assisted dying. And I said, well, you can't.
What's the difference,
Well, he wanted to say, well, euthanasia is, putting somebody down, and assisted dying is, is this compassionate approach to assisted death, to putting people out of their misery. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, regardless of your stance, how you feel, you end up, somebody has to be injected with a lethal substance or taking pills to end their life that you gave them. So there's always somebody that ends up deceased. And he finally agreed with me, and we're able to move on with the interview. But it's a real quagmire. And so I got into this, and I have a good friend, Alex Schadenberg, who works for the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, the executive director for the international, this body that works so hard to inform people of the dangers of any law that allows this type of killing being introduced into the healthcare system or anywhere, for that matter. But you asked me why I got involved. I think the biggest thing is that when I heard that the number one reason for people asking for assisted death was not pain. It was not pain. I always thought it was pain. I always thought people were suffering incredibly. And yes, that is the case for a lot of these media ones that we hear about. But the number one reason for people asking for euthanasia, for assisted death, whatever language you want to use, what do you think it is? I'll throw it back to you. What do you think the number one reason people would ask for euthanasia?
Well, as myself, I took care of my parents as they died. They died about 5 years ago, and I was a caregiver for them. And they thought they were being burdensome on me, and they weren't. They were not. I considered it an honor to take care of them, those who had taken care of me when I was so young. But now that I'm a father, I got 3 kids, I would probably feel the same way if I was in their situation. I would think that I'm being a burden on my family. Maybe I'd be worth more dead than alive, so to speak. Let's move past this. It wouldn't be for my sake; it'd be for their benefit, so to speak.
Burden ranks right up there as some of the number one reasons why. The number one reason, and burden is you're bang on. But the number one reason why people ask is fear of suffering. They fear suffering. And number two is that they're so distraught by their situation they can't think of any way out. burden also falls right into the top 5 there. So we've got these societal issues right at the top of the spectrum, and pain sometimes, like in Oregon, hits the chart maybe 18th or 19th on the reasons. And these aren't my stats. These are stats that come out by the medical commissions and the medical commission in Belgium. And the second reason why I got involved was I heard that in 2013 that 1,000 people were euthanized or had assisted death without request. So they never asked for it. This was in Belgium.
That's murder then.
Well, it is.
Wow.
I mean, it's always murder, but here you have people who haven't asked for, and you have 1,000, and these people would have had dementia or Alzheimer's or some couldn't enable to make decisions on their own. And this is in the Flanders region of Belgium, very small country, beautiful country, but somebody decided, doctors with families, decided together or on their own that these people quality of life was not worth it. So they upped the morphine or did whatever they had to do, and these 1,000 people are no longer on the earth. And
I've traveled the world, and I know you have too. And a lot of the countries that we would consider maybe backwards or not as progressive as the United States or Canada or even Belgium, it's a pretty progressive country. They take care of their elder. They respect the elders. They take care of them. They nurse them. They keep them and comfort them. This would be just crazy to these people, It's where have we gotten? I mean, here in the United States, we'll put our, at a sneeze, if you're over 70, you're in a nursing home, Where have we gotten as far as society goes? How did we get here?
I asked a good bishop that question in where was I? The Netherlands last year. I said, well, how have we gotten this far? And he nailed it. He said, it's about individualism. That how I feel, and especially we have in Canada, we have the Charter of Rights where individual rights kind of trump the good of society. I would be argued on that, but I firmly believe that individual rights have now trumped the mainstream. We can talk about many other different ways that that's happened, but with regards to individual rights, so that idea of individualism versus this idea that we are a community, we are interdependent. This idea of burden is actually the wrong way of looking at it. We have to look at these things, as you said so eloquently, that this is a blessing to take away those times from your children, from children taking care of parents. It's like, what? My dad suffered cancer last year, and God bless him, he's still okay. He's a survivor. But even Dad, who's born and raised Christian, born and raised Catholic, he'd never think about this. But even then, he felt like he was a burden on us, always having to take him to the doctors and get his chemo. And I said, Dad, these are the most precious times for me. These are the most precious times. So please don't ever. And so the good bishop, he talks about this idea of interdependence versus autonomy. So we have to, and this is the big solution, or at least the big consideration, is that we can solve a lot of what we're talking about here by being more interdependent on each other, by getting out to nursing homes, by being the reason for somebody's tomorrow. Now, obviously, there's pain and pain medication and all this other stuff that comes into it. Those are other issues, and those are systemic issues that we have to deal with. But the idea that I want people to come away with at the end of this documentary is that idea that we are not autonomous people. We are interdependent people. The other issues we deal with in the documentary are the 3 deceptions. The one is autonomy that I just talked about, and the first one, and then there's safeguards. The idea that safeguards can protect us, and then the idea that this is truly a form of compassionate care. We hear about dignity with dying.
I want to get into that a little bit deeper here in a minute. I want to show, we got a little roll-in of the documentary. It's a couple minutes long. Let's show that now so people can kind of get an idea of what's going on if they're just joining us. We are talking about a documentary that's come out, and it's available on the website. Give the website real quick.
It's 2 words, right together, vulnerablefilm.com. Vulnerablefilm.com, one word.
And it's about the worldwide epidemic of euthanasia and the deception behind it. And this is why it's called the Euthanasia Deception. So right now, let's go to that roll-in real quick. And when we come back, we're going to learn about the compassionate side, as they call it. So let's go to that real quick.
On April 19th, 2012, my mother receives a lethal injection in the hospital of the Free University in Brussels.
But you had no idea?
No.
My granddad developed non-Hodgkin's lymph cancer at roughly 80 years of age. He was basically killed by the medical staff in the care home.
My mother was physically healthy. I mean, she was, yes, indeed. She was going in and out of depressions all her life, but is this a reason for euthanasia? Apparently it is.
We had a few times when people tried to put us under pressure to have her euthanized. She's just a child like every other child in our family.
So my mother, instead of going for the palliative treatment, she said, I want euthanasia. Had there been no euthanasia in Belgium, she would not have applied, for sure.
I think it's impossible to put safeguards, because it's also impossible to know what is a terminally ill situation. In Belgium, patients are killed by euthanasia at the first diagnosis of Alzheimer or of a malignant disease of a cancer. From all the cases, only 60 to 70% were declared to the Commission. So this means that 30 to 40% of the cases of euthanasia are even not declared, and there is no control of the law.
She was the one going to die, but we were her sons, we loved her, and we wanted the best for her.
Was there a consensus?
There was not a consensus.
As a mother, it wasn't only her quality of life, it was also the quality of life of her own grandchildren.
Well, the law says that nobody has to be aware of the demand of the patient. It's only the patient who will decide. It is strange because at the same time they don't respect the autonomy of doctors who want to not do euthanasia, and they even don't respect the autonomy of institutions who don't want to choose for euthanasia.
An aunt of mine was visiting him, and she was giving him some water, and one of the nursing staff came by and said to her, "Don't do that, you're prolonging the process of his dying." And she said, "What?"
You see, once you're dead, you're dead. So there's no chance of changing your mind. That's the finality of this. You must understand that this issue is not like any other.
And I regret my mother had a treatment on that level. I think she and all the other people dying deserve more. We owe it to them.
This is a worldwide issue. This is an issue now that is being debated in nearly every country in the world, and there's pressure in almost all jurisdictions of the world to legalize doctors killing their patients.
We help people to die, controlling their suffering and controlling their symptoms. We don't help them to die by killing them.
What is our society becoming? It's a quality society. Only the best will survive.
Alrighty, there's a little sneak peek of the documentary. Now, Kevin, if people want to watch this or share it with anybody, how can they get a hold of you? How can they watch it online, television, any place like that?
Well, the best place to go to watch the film is vulnerablefilm.com. That's two words, vulnerable film. It's kind of squished into one word, vulnerablefilm.com. Mm-hmm. My company is Dunn Media and Entertainment. I'm at dunnmedia.ca. That's DUNN media.ca. The big partner with Dunn Media on this project is the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition International. And they are at epcc.ca, epcc.ca. doing incredible work all around the world, trying to expose the deceptions behind euthanasia and assisted suicide.
Yeah. And if people's watching this tonight, and they might not be a Christian. We got a lot of people on here that's not a Christian, because we get a lot of people that saved through this program. Sure. They need to be watching this too. It's not just a religious view. This is a moral view that's just, it's wrong. Right.
Yeah, well, wherever you stand on this issue, the idea that this is contained only with those very few that are suffering uncontrollably and don't want to be, as people say, put out of their misery, that is not the case. Those are very small compared to the amount of abuse that happens right through all of society when we open up death on demand, if you will.
Case in point, Belgium, where there was thousands murdered without their knowledge or without their consent or will.
Absolutely, and in Canada, we're in the middle of just yesterday, a nurse was convicted of or charged with 7 murders in a care facility. Now we're still trying to figure out what the motive is, but we have abuse in our care facilities, and so what are laws like this going to do to the vulnerable? That is the big question we have to ask. Exactly. And we have, of course, disability rights advocates who are very upset about this as well. But we can talk about that.
Well, let's take a break for a song. When we come back, let's talk about the compassion side of this. And let's talk about, I know you and your partners have talked to family members that's gone through this situation and stuff. Let's hear about that too. But right now, Wesley's going to be doing a song on that wonderful piano. Man, he does a good job. When he was on the cross, I was on his mind. All righty, thank you so much, Wesley. And a lot of people has been requesting him back on, so they are getting their wish tonight. Wesley Davenport, I call him the piano man, wonderful guy. He knows every one of those 88 keys. It's amazing. But anyway, we're going to finish up our interview tonight with Kevin Dunn. And if you're just now joining us, Kevin has done a documentary called Euthanasia Deception, The Euthanasia Deception. You're Canadian, where euthanasia is legal all across the board. They're every province. Here in the U.S., I think we figured out, 5 states, something like that. In D.C., Colorado's on the books to be legal. A lot of people consider these mercy killings, almost like you said, putting your dog down, you know. Why is that not the case? On the surface, it looks that way, but that is not the case, is it, Kevin?
No. We have to be concerned about language, you know. From a Christian perspective, obviously, we know that our Lord said, you know, "Thou shalt not kill." He was pretty clear about that.
Right.
But he also relieved a lot of people's suffering. So a lot of people say, well, you know, is it right to let people suffer? Well, the question we ask in the documentary is are those cases that many? And even in those few cases that we do hear about, and the fact of the matter is those cases are not. We've mentioned before that pain is way down there on the reasons why people ask for this. Number one is fear of suffering. Number two is I'm so distraught by my situation, I don't know what to do. So therefore I'm asking for this. So the idea of this as a compassionate response, well, we're dealing with the 17th or 18th issue why people are asking for assisted death.
Wow.
How do we address the number one reason that I'm fearing suffering? Well, we need to be more present. The medical community needs to be more present. We as Christians, as people of faith, as people of no faith, you know, are compassionate towards those. You know, my daughter goes to see an elderly woman every week who's in a care home. She's 95 in a wheelchair, and she pointed to an article in the paper about euthanasia, and she said, you know, have you heard about this? And my daughter said, oh, yes, I have. I feel it terrible that people would have to resort to that. And she said, well, you know, I can't understand why I'm still stuck in this wheelchair, and I might consider doing that myself. And then she said, well, why? She said, who would I come and visit every week? She says, oh, you don't enjoy coming to do that. You're just doing this because you feel sorry for me. She says, no, you're part of my life. And the woman in the wheelchair looked back at her and said, you know, I never knew that. I never thought it.
Right.
She said, and the discussion was ended. And we hear so many stories where people, even doctors, the doctor in the documentary talks about, you know, doing exactly that. The daughter was in the room. The mother wanted euthanasia, and the daughter was in the room. And he turned to a person who asked for euthanasia and said, the doctor said, "Have you ever cared for anyone in your life?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I cared for my mother when she was ill and until she passed, and my father." And she said, "Did you, you know, were those tough times?" "Yes, they were." "Would you ever take those times back?" "No, I wouldn't." And so the doctor turned to the daughter and said, "Well, maybe it's now your turn." And she didn't even blink an eye, and she grabbed her mother's feet and she said, "Mommy, let me take care of you now." And so these are the visceral moments. These are the moments. These are the times in our life. Yes, we will have suffering. Yes, there will be down times. But to take these times away, 70% of people in Belgium, and this law has been around for 15 years in Belgium, 60% of the people in Belgium who ask for euthanasia don't want to hear about any treatments, about any new research. They just want to end their life. And so, like the doctor says in the documentary, how can we even put a time frame on such? He says, I'm not God. I don't know whether a person will live a month, a year. Yes, in the end stages, it's weeks. But as soon as you open that door, you end up with so much abuse, the burden stuff that we talked about earlier. And then we get into the whole idea disability rights. I mean, so many disability rights advocates are so concerned about how these laws are going to affect them. So, case in point, you know, you have somebody with cerebral palsy, you know, a terrible disease. No one would wish that disease on anyone, but
Right.
we all know people with cerebral palsy who get around, who do okay, who are loved, and but
not only they love, but they're able to love, and I mean they are able to add so much to life, and people are able to add so much to their life. It's not a wasted life, or anything like that. It's a perfect life, how God created them, and we should be happy. And in most cases, everybody I know in that situation, they are happy, and the families are happy, and they love them, and it's not, you know, it's just beautiful.
Well, we have a case in Belgium and we interview him in the documentary. Beautiful a guy named Lionel Rosemount, who has a daughter, 20 years old, with a severe brain condition, and brothers and sisters, 4 brothers and sisters to Tikva, and he will be with Tikva in the wheelchair out in the streets of Belgium, and good-minded people will walk up to him and say, "Have you ever considered, you know, her quality of life and maybe, you know, euthanasia?" It actually would come up to him and say, you know, okay, like
total strangers just saying, hey.
And he's going, what? She's part of she's loved. We love her. She shows love to her family. She may not have all of her brain facilities, but she's loved. Oh. And he says we couldn't think of the world without her. And yet this is what happens to a society that embraces these ideologies that quality of life is like structured. This is quality of life. Anything outside of these borders doesn't have quality of life. And so, as the guy says in the documentary, Mark Pickup, who has multiple sclerosis, he says, you know, quality of life is a moving target. And he's had MS for 30 years. And he said, when I was diagnosed with this disease, he says, you know, people ask me about my quality of life. I was moving up. I was doing things. I had a great job, you know, my family. And he said, had there been a Kevorkian around at that time, or had there been a law around at that time, he says, I might have considered it. In fact, I probably would have, he says. He says, but the thing about quality of life is a moving target. We can't base our decisions based on the despair of today. Because, as Christians, we're people of hope. So therefore, this flies right in the face of hope. But even if we don't have any faith, we all know that some of the best people in the world, some of the most heroic people in the world that we look up to, had those down times, and they got over them. How did they get over them? Interdependence, by us going out. And so we need to be a people of interdependence. And so that's really part of the solution.
Yeah, I've met people with MS or lupus or any of these other diseases that people know that it's going to kill them. And they were so happy and thankful for what time they have, when I know people that are perfectly healthy and wealthy and rich and that's miserable with life, you know? And so you can't, quality of life, and as far as your physical or your mental or your spiritual, it's up to you at that point, really, how you handle it. And what helps us as Christians is the fact that we know Christ is with us. We were talking about during the break here a little while ago about actual suffering and what the Bible says about suffering. As we all know, Christ, he helped end suffering in a lot of situations. He never killed anybody to end suffering. But he also suffered on the cross for hours and hours and hours. Tell us about the importance in life as suffering brings to life here.
Well, as Mark Pickup, who has MS and struggles with all of the concerns and problems that come with us, he says, you know, suffering strips away everything that is non-essential. It leaves us with what truly matters in life.
Right.
Those that love us, the love that we can give, the small contributions we can do despite our disabilities, because we're all disabled. We're all disabled. There's a woman in the documentary, Amy Hasbrook, who's legally blind, suffers with PTSD. She's a lawyer. But she deals with it. She says, there are many times that I don't feel like I want to move on. And she says, I'm afraid of going to the doctor, a doctor who may say, you know, I can see how you might feel that way. And then all she would need is a little bit of push one way, and she gets to push the other way. And so we've got this situation where the disabled are saying, as Mark Pickup says in the documentary, who gets suicide prevention and who gets assisted suicide? He says, I'll tell you who. It's me in this wheelchair that will be pushed towards assisted suicide, and my healthy neighbor will get suicide prevention. Why?
Right.
Because there's false idea of what compassionate care is. And the more we get into it, and this is not me, this is Belgium. It's in full. I mean, we know that story about Tikva I told earlier, the young girl with the brain challenges, you know, where that it just seeps in, and quality of life gets booked in between these two, and quality of life is such a moving target. And you know, whatever our quality of life is, you know, rich, poor, healthy, sick, we can make it redemptive. We can make it work.
Right.
Especially when we're able to look to our Savior, who was the model for us. He was the model for us. Pardon me if that's coming through. I just have to cancel a call.
You're fine. Well, let me ask you, we got about 4 minutes left or so. What can we as Christians do here in the United States and in Canada and around the world to stop these laws from happening? Here in the U.S., it's by state decision. We've got 4, 5, 6 states plus District of Columbia that's legalized this. Canada is completely legalized. Belgium, as we've been referencing a lot, is legal if you like it or not. In some states, I mean, some situations with people getting murdered and no. But what is, as Christians, can we do?
Well, as Christians or people of faith, anyone, the first thing we can do is become informed and realize that when people say, well, how can you say that about somebody who's suffering so hard? Realize, A, that those cases are very small on the scale. So become informed. Not that we shouldn't care about those cases. We have to pray for those people. We have to be there for them. But become informed. When you go to the film's website, vulnerablefilm.com, go to the extras section, and you will see there like 4 apologetic videos that are very, very clear. It's Vulnerable Film. The word vulnerable, vulnerable, vulnerablefilm.com.
Excellent.
And right there.
Now we just got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Tell us, as Christians, what can we do in the United States? What can we do in Canada? We're streaming all over the globe, so there might be some people in Canada watching us. What can we do in Europe and all these other countries that are passing these laws, allowing what I consider legalized murder? I consider, like you said, abortion, that's legalized murder. Euthanasia is legalized murder. How can we stop this?
Well, you know, we all know that more things are wrought by prayer than anything else. So first of all, we have to pray for our leaders. You know, we got to pray. This is, you know, if we knew 40 years ago what abortion laws would have done to our country, if we knew, we would have been up in arms. But we said, you know, as a country, we said, well, in those certain circumstances, that's okay. Well, we know where abortion's gone. Well, we're at the beginning of the other end of the spectrum now. And 10, 15 years from now, we'll be looking back on why didn't we do more? So A, we got to pray. We have to pray. B, we have to do something. And so we have to talk. We have to talk to our the people that are making these laws. We have to talk to our government leaders. But we can't talk to them unless we become informed. So we've kept the price of the documentary. I hate to bring price into it, but like for $2.50, you watch the documentary, you get it all. You get the 3 deceptions that are right there. The idea that this is a compassionate response, the idea that safeguards will work, and the idea that we are autonomous individuals. All 3 of those are blown right out of the water when we see what's happened in Belgium and the Netherlands. As Christians too, we can look at the Bible and look at the whole idea of suffering and redemptive suffering, why God allows suffering, and how we can look to Christ who you know, St. Paul says in Colossians, he says, now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, our sufferings for your sake, for I fill up what is lacking in the afflictions of Christ.
Right.
You know, that's such a beautiful one. You know, now with Christ I am nailed to the cross. It is no longer I that live in Christ, but Christ who lives in me. Galatians. So we've got a number of different. We have to meditate on these beautiful passages on suffering and why God allows suffering in our life and in the life of individuals. Mm-hmm. Thirdly, I would say that, you know, as we become informed, we realize that we have to fight and ask for more and better education for our doctors and nurses so that we can have quality palliative care. I know in Canada, only 30% of people have access to quality palliative care, end-of-life care. Mm-hmm. And so without that care, we become hopeless. And I don't know what the situation is in the States, but I know it's, and I don't have the number in the States, but I know it's very close to that. And so without that, we become very hopeless. And as Christians, we are people of hope. Right. So we have to encourage quality palliative care, end-of-life care. And you know, and really, really fight for it. But the thing we can do right away, as soon as this broadcast is over, if we want to do something to end this, we can do something very, very proactive, and that is go and become connected with an individual in a nursing home, in a care home. Call your aged mother, your father. You know, call somebody who you know is disabled or who has trouble getting around. Say, hey, you mind if can I help you this month and go pick up your groceries for you? Mm-hmm. You know, the old golden rule is gonna solve all of our problems. Love. We have to get out there and love.
And one day, if we are lucky, we're going to be in that position, and we're going to want people to come and look after us and to come and love us. You know, that's if we're lucky. We might not live that long, you know, but if we're lucky, we'll be there, and we'll want that same position that we need to show them now. That's for sure.
We do. You know, I know there are some Catholics that are listening out there, but people of all faiths, we can remember Pope John Paul II when he came out on the terrace at the very end. He had Parkinson's. He could barely speak. Mm-hmm. But as one guy talks in the documentary, he speaks about how even though he couldn't speak, it wasn't about what he could do.
Right.
It's about who he was to the world. And that's for our parents, that's for ourselves. It's not about what we can do, it's about who we are, who God made us to be. Mm-hmm. And so whether I'm healthy or not healthy, whether I'm walking around or in a hospital bed close to death, there is a reason for me to be here. And there is a reason for my suffering. There's a reason for it. And we just have to reach out and touch those people who are suffering or accept that suffering ourselves as a way to our sanctification.
Well, Kevin, I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to encourage our viewers to check out the film, vulnerablefilm.com. It's on Vimeo, or you can go on that website. I encourage you to go to the website because you've got more information on there than just the documentary. You have links and other things like that to a lot more than this. So thank you so much, Kevin, and pray blessings on you. And I hope that this has helped you think. If you've thinking about, you know, euthanasia or you may know somebody that's in a suffering situation, get this film in their hands. Let them watch this, and I know they're going to be blessed. So thank you so much, Kevin, for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Dante. God bless you, too.
Yes, sir. Right now, we're going to go back to Wesley Davenport, and he's going to be singing I Bowed on My Knees and Cried Holy. All righty, Wesley, thank you so much for that great song, and he's going to be joining us in the second hour to play more of that wonderful piano. But my second guest of the program tonight is Robia Scott, and she's joining me all the way from Orange County, California. Thank you so much for being here, Robia.
Thank you for having me.
Or thank you for being in your kitchen or wherever you're at.
I know, I'm in the comforts of home. It's so nice. It's
I
so
love
casual.
it. I love
You want
it.
a little something, something? Want me to make you coffee?
Yes,
What's going on?
please. Yeah,
All
you
right.
can overnight it to me. It might be cold by then. But Robia, you were an actress and a model, and so you got saved, and now you're an author, and you pastor a church with your husband. Let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about your acting career. I find that fascinating. Tell us about all what you were into and how you got into acting.
All right, well, I started my, before I started my professional career, I saw the movie Flashdance many years ago. Do you remember Flashdance?
I do not.
You don't? Oh, you're too young.
I'm 31.
Okay. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. All right,
so-
we're not going to go there.
yeah.
I saw the movie Flashdance when I was a certain age, and I was very inspired. And the next day I got a big old perm, because that's what Jennifer Beals had. And I cut off all my sweatshirts, and I had leg warmers, with every outfit. And I decided I was going to be a professional dancer. So I studied intensely, and at 16, I went professional. I started working, and I got hired for various music videos. This is at the time where MTV was really becoming prominent. So there was music videos were just nonstop. So I did a bunch of that, and then I got hired to work with Prince.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Prince had just passed away recently.
Prince, who unfortunately just passed away. It's very sad news, devastating. I got called to do a music video with him, and he was looking for 2 identical twins, and he couldn't find identical twins. So there was another girl and me, and we looked alike, so he hired us as Diamond and Pearl for the Diamonds and Pearls album.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah. So I did that. I toured with him. Then I transitioned into acting, did a bunch of different TV shows, Beverly Hills 90210. And then I got hired for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it was during my time on Buffy the Vampire Slayer where I became a Christian.
Wow. So you were these are very successful shows. Of course, Prince was so successful, just in his own self. But then 90210 and Buffy, they were very successful programs back in the 90s. I got to see Buffy. 90210 is a little bit too young for still, I think. I'm not meaning to rub it in. I meant to get on like Netflix and watch some episodes and try to, catch, familiarize myself. But I bet my wife watched it. It was more of a girl show, wasn't it?
Buffy?
Yeah, I know, 90210.
90210, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. So if it didn't have fire trucks or trains or something, I might not have
You
been
weren't into it. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
So you got saved. Let's. We got about 5 minutes left in this hour. So let's talk about real quick, and if we don't cover it all, we'll cover it in the next hour. What led up to your salvation? Tell us about when and where you were when you got saved.
Well, I was really living the dream. In my early 20s, I had reached the pinnacle. I was on TV. I was successful. I was, making a lot of money. I was traveling around the world. But there were still issues that I was dealing with internally. I was still just didn't feel like I had that much peace. I was a chain smoker. I had issues with eating and my body image and weight. And I was just looking for God. I was looking for something bigger. I was looking for freedom. I was searching. So throughout my search, I originally got kind of caught up in the New Age movement because that's very prevalent in my area in Southern California.
Right.
So I was doing all sorts of New Age practices, but I was still chain smoking and I was still tormented and I still didn't have peace. So I was open to keep seeking because I just felt that if I really encountered God in a real way, I would get help with some of the things I was dealing with.
Right.
So I knew
now,
I
were
had
you raised in a Christian home, or did you know who Jesus was?
I was raised Catholic. Okay. So I did know Jesus, but I didn't really feel a strong connection with the Catholic Church. I was younger. I just went with my grandmother, that kind of thing. So when I got older and I was searching for God, I was just looking for something that I connected with a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, tell us about when you finally got with Jesus. Made it right.
Well, I have a kind of an interesting story. God was really funny. I said, God, I believe in you, but I don't get the whole Jesus born again thing because I just didn't see a lot of examples of Christians. I just didn't, only Christian television really. I didn't really understand what it meant to be a Christian. So I said, God, I believe in you. I don't get the whole born again thing. If Jesus is really the way, if there's really truth to being born again, give me a sign about Jesus. Give me something. So I was praying this while I was in my car driving, and I was on the freeway. And all of a sudden, as I'm praying, I was kind of in that prayer zone driving, and I realized that I'm encompassed by a huge pack of Hell's Angels bikers.
Oh, wow.
I know. And I'm thinking, hi, ironic, I'm praying, and I've got Hell's Angels surrounding my little car. So I've got the bikers in front of me, the bikers on either side. I look more closely. There's 2 bikes in front of me. The guy's got the leather jackets on. They look really tough. On the back of their leather jackets was a huge cross, and it said, "We ride for Jesus."
Oh, wow.
I know.
Wow.
I know. So I started cracking up. I was like, all right, God, this is funny. And it was through a series of events like that, I wound up being led to a church, and things just started to speak to me. And then I said, okay, this is true. This is right. And I became a Christian and started my journey.
Wow. Well, we just got just a minute left in this hour. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the book and talking about all the other things that you got going on. Give us a real quick teaser, though, about the book before we have to take a break.
A quick teaser is when I became a Christian in the first year or two, God started really touching my life powerfully, and I was getting freedom and healing in many areas, but the area of food actually was getting worse.
Wow.
And it was in a moment of prayer and in an encounter, hearing God's voice, that he started me on a path of healing, and where Counterfeit Comforts was birthed. And I will fill you in.
I'm excited about that because the area of food is where I also have an issue. So maybe I need to read this. So, well, we got just a few seconds, but did you get large, or was you just eating to comfort yourself, or what?
Yeah, with me, sometimes they ask me, were you really overweight or were you heavy? I was never overweight. I was always very thin and very fit. So you wouldn't see that I had any kind of issue by looking at me.
Right.
But it was internally. It was, just struggling with being consumed with what I'm going to eat, when I'm going to eat, how much I'm going to eat, not eating, overeating. Kind of starving, binging, just all of that place where I lived inside of myself.
Wow. Well, we got to take a break.
Not anymore.
Yes, excellent. Well, we got to take a break. We're going to be right back. We're going to continue our interview with Robia, so you don't want to miss anything. So come back just a minute. And remember, we got prayer partners standing by, so call in during the break and get prayer. Thank you. We'll be right back.